The Australian IPO market struggles with listings at their weakest in 15 years. Pro-Palestinian rallies in Melbourne and Sydney over the weekend remain peaceful, and Meta's Mark Zuckerberg becomes the world's second richest person. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news. For people who make their own decisions, it is Monday, the 7th of October, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, with much of the country enjoying a long weekend, this morning's show is slightly shorter than normal, but I've got to say it's still full of everything that you need to know, which is really saying something. It probably tells you that we can cram everything you need to know into, 10 minutes? And usually we talk for 21.
Well, that might be the case, Michael, but I think every show we do is packed full of value.
Are we allowed to self-assess our own value?
Yeah. Well, better us than someone else.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're bound to get higher marks. And of course, it'll be followed by your chat with Stephen Koukoulas for the week ahead, so there is plenty coming up.
Plenty to talk about, Michael.
Indeed. The main story this morning, Sean, the Australian IPO market is struggling with listings at their weakest pace in 15 years, in part because of all the private money soaking up assets.
The value of new equity raised from ASX initial public offerings in the first 9 months of this year was just $720 million. That's the weakest since 2012, according to data compiled by Dealogic for the Australian Financial Review. The number of floats, 15, in the 9 months to the end of September, was the lowest since the global financial crisis back in 2009. Guzman Gomez is the highest profile IPO this year. It raised just $335 million, and retail investors had to wait until it hit the market to buy in. What's happening is that there's a flood of private money buying up assets. Big super funds, for example, are not just buying things like Sydney Airport and delisting them, they're also buying companies before they even make the ASX. For example, earlier this month, Blackstone bought local data centre operator AirTrunk for about $23.5 billion. There is a real dearth of listings on the ASX.
Is it going to get any better, Sean?
The trend is not your friend in this instance, Michael.
Oh dear, that does not sound optimistic.
Now, there are 7 companies scheduled to float on the ASX in the next 3 weeks by the end of this month. Some of them have already delayed floating previously and could do so again. Certainly, there's nothing big in the pipeline. If you ignore the listed investment trusts, the biggest raising scheduled this month is just $20 million, one from a lithium group. There's also a mineral sands group trying to raise that amount of money. This is partly a result of the growth of Australia's big investors. We've been talking a bit about this in the past couple of weeks. Australian Super and Australian Retirement Trust dominate inflows of superannuation. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they can just afford to buy the whole company rather than have to invest on the ASX. It's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, it certainly is. Local markets, where do we finish up on Friday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed down 0.7% to 8,150 points, ending a 3-week winning streak. Fears about tensions in the Middle East dominated trading, and for the week, the bourse was down 0.8%. Miners were hardest hit on Friday as the enthusiasm about last week's stimulus measures from Beijing waned somewhat. BHP and Rio Tinto both dropped close to 2%. The banks also fell, with the big four all down around 1.5%. Tech stocks were lower, led by WiseTech Global, which ended down 3%, and industrial property giant Goodman Group closed 2% lower. CSL was an outperformer. Best on the day last week was Light & Wonder, which rallied 8% after the gaming company said it intended to develop a new version of its popular Dragon Train game following an intellectual property dispute with Aristocrat Leisure earlier this year.
Now, after the show, Sean, of course, you have Fear and Greed the week ahead with Stephen Koukoulas. But after that, stick around because we have the first in a series of interviews, there'll be one a month, with our friends at Vanguard. And today's interview is with Adam DeSanctis, and it's all about ETFs.
Yeah, so we start off by asking Adam, why have ETFs become so popular and what sort of ETFs are particularly popular? And we go from there. It's a really fascinating chat just to see how many Australian investors are now in love with ETFs.
Yeah, and of course, Vanguard is a big player in this space. And so if there are any trends, they will see them.
Yep.
And so Adam kind of takes us through all of that. It is well worth a listen. It is coming up after the show. International markets, what's happening there?
US jobs data released over the weekend showed that the world's largest economy remains pretty resilient, really. Wall Street ended higher on the back of those. For last week, Wall Street closed up just a touch. Eurozone shares fell by 2.2%. Japanese shares were down about 3%. Oil continues to rise, with Brent crude jumping to more than $78 a barrel. What's it mean for petrol prices? That's what we all want to know. Well, they're unlikely to fall in the short term. According to the ACCC, Sydney and Adelaide prices are on an upswing. Melbourne prices are near their bottom. Brisbane prices are close to a peak, while Perth prices are actually on the way down. Iron ore prices have continued their strong run. They're up to about $108 a tonne, and the Aussie dollar has slipped below 68 US cents.
All right, and of course, international news today is brought to you by Blue Chip Communication, the experts helping financial services companies market, communicate and grow. Visit bluechipcommunication.com.au. We still have a fair bit to get through, Sean, even though it is a shorter show. We'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, largely peaceful pro-Palestinian rallies were held in Melbourne and Sydney yesterday, and Jewish vigils last night ahead of today's one-year anniversary of Hamas's invasion of Israel.
One person was arrested in New South Wales for carrying an Israeli flag which included a Nazi swastika rather than a Star of David, and 4 in Melbourne for public order-related matters. But generally, they were pretty well behaved. An estimated 7,000 people marched in Melbourne, 10,000 in Sydney. Unauthorised events are scheduled for today as well. Broadly, banned flags and symbols were not in evidence at the rallies. Some protesters held up Palestinian flags, while others flew the Lebanese flag. A small number hoisted banners with similar colours to Hezbollah's flag, but without the terrorist organisation's official symbol.
Elon Musk and his company X Corp must comply with a transparency notice issued by the country's online safety watchdog, the federal court has ruled.
X unsuccessfully challenged the validity of the notice and a $610,500 fine associated with it. But Judge Michael Wheelahan on Friday found that the e-safety commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, was right to issue the notice requiring the platform to provide information about how it was meeting the basic online safety expectations in relation to child sexual exploitation and abuse material and activity hosted on its site. X took the commissioner to court last year, challenging the fine and the validity of the notice itself. Brett Walker SC, acting for the company, argued the notice did not apply because the company did not exist when the notice was issued. The notice was given to Twitter in February 2023. X Corp actually came into being on March 2023, switched the name, argued that. X Corp was also ordered to pay the e-safety commissioner's costs. This case is separate from the ongoing Administrative Appeals Tribunal matter concerning a video of a stabbing of a bishop in Western Sydney.
I reckon that the e-safety commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, would have one of the toughest jobs in the country, because you've got to walk that line between freedom of speech and keeping people safe. And just the very nature of this job means that she is going to just keep coming up against people like Elon Musk, who have a massive platform and have no hesitation in really taking people on head on.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, what the e-safety commissioner was asking was information about how X is responding to, child sexual exploitation, abuse material, that sort of stuff, which is kind of common sense to me. I mean, of course, they need to have a process and plan in place for that, and they should actually tell the e-safety commissioner about it. And so something goes, it's not trivial in any way, but it's almost irrational to argue that. But, yep, she comes up against them, they argue it, and that's all her time. There's cost. I know that X lost the judgment, but that's a lot of, the e-safety commissioner's time given to that, when I think she probably could be doing other things.
Yeah, you would expect a request like that would be fairly non-controversial, right?
You'd think
As
so.
you say, it's just like these are just processes. Just tell us what you're doing and we'll just kind of move on with it.
Yeah.
Anyway, fascinating story, that one. Last week, Sean, we talked quite a bit about Qatar Airways taking a 25% stake in Virgin, upping the stakes against Qantas. But the national carrier has hit back where it counts: food. Almost 70 new items are set to join the Qantas menu for domestic flights. Is this going to be enough, Sean?
Oh, I don't know. In its words, Qantas is rolling out a refreshed dining experience. It certainly is an experience when you eat on a plane. Happening throughout this month. Qantas keeps saying, we are the only domestic airline to offer complimentary food and beverages and Wi-Fi in economy. Very true. Definitely a selling point. Among the new additions in economy class, Michael, the macadamia granola slice. I could go that one. Farmhouse crackers with whipped feta dip and carrots.
Oh, that sounds nice.
No.
Yeah.
Focaccia with chorizo, pesto and bell peppers.
Oh, yeah.
Cottage cheese and spinach samosas.
No.
That's and triple choc brownie cookie. Absolutely.
Oh, that's got to be. That's a winner.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
Except that they'll run out by row 15. Yeah.
That's right. Business class travellers could end up snacking on smoked salmon bagels, miso glazed chicken salad, or dark chocolate sour cherry fondant cake.
Oh, see, that sounds...
You're not going to get near it. That's business class, Mike. You're not going to get near it.
I know, but can you imagine, salmon bagels, smoked salmon bagels? There's going to be a lot of people with salmon breath on a plane.
Oh,
then surely that's not wise.
Yeah, right.
Oh, come on,
Qantas.
Employ me as your food consultant. Sorry, go on.
Do you know who the number one? I mean, this is foodandwine.com put out rankings of the best food out there. Number one, it's got nothing to do with an Australian airline, nothing to do with this story, really. I was just interested.
Who is it? It'd be one of the big players. I'm guessing Qatar.
Yeah, almost Emirates.
Oh, really?
And then Turkish Airlines. Turkish really made great strides in recent years. And then number 3, Singapore Airlines. I think Qatar, which obviously is taking part of Virgin, I think it's about 5th or something.
Oh, I would have thought they'd be higher because they were number 1 ranked on a whole bunch of different things. Remember, they're the number 1 airline in the world, aren't they, based on the airline ratings? Is it?
Something like that, yes.
Earlier this year. So I would have thought they'd be higher for food. Goodness me, you can tell it's a public holiday when we just start going down an airline food rabbit hole. Let's turn to international news. Now, a strike, Sean, that closed US East and Gulf Coast ports will be suspended after the Dock Workers Union and the group representing ocean carriers reached an agreement.
The biggest strike on US ports in several decades was threatening to hurt the economy ahead of the presidential election negotiations, which had been at an impasse over wages and automation for months, are now continuing, according to both sides. The work stoppage had threatened to upend the US economy by snarling global supply chains and halting imports of fresh foods, pharmaceuticals and other consumer goods, according to the Financial Times. JP Morgan analysts estimated that it could cost the US economy as much as $4.5 billion a day. The 36 affected ports span from Maine to Texas. Together, they handle about 1/4 of the country's annual international trade, worth about $3 trillion. Joe Biden, the US president, very happy about the whole deal. He congratulated both sides, saying that it represents critical progress towards a strong contract.
And finally, we mentioned this one at the top of the show, Sean. Mark Zuckerberg became the world's 2nd richest person for the first time late last week, jumping ahead of Jeff Bezos as shares of Meta platforms continue to climb.
So basically, Zuckerberg's bet on the metaverse, which initially looked like a disaster, has paid off in recent months, pushing his net worth to a high watermark of $206.2 billion, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. That puts him $1.1 billion ahead of Amazon's Bezos. He's still about $50 billion behind Tesla's Elon Musk. Meta shares have risen 23% since reporting better than expected sales in the second quarter. That's the June quarter. They closed late last week at an all-time high. Zuckerberg, who owns a 13% stake in the company, has seen his fortune grow by $78 billion just this year, the most of any of the world's 500 richest people tracked by Bloomberg.
Staggering numbers. Up next is Fear and Greed, the week ahead, featuring our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas.
Yes, Stephen is very excited. Well, he's always excited, Michael. This week, it's all about, there's a consumer sentiment survey, there's business conditions and sentiment survey, but there's a few Reserve Bank speeches this week, and that's really got him going.
It certainly has. It is well worth a listen just to hear the excitement levels. We should have a meter that judges how excited Stephen Koukoulas is about the economy.
A fun meter. Yes.
And after that, Adam DeSanctis is your guest on the Fear and Greed daily interview. Adam DeSanctis is, of course, from Vanguard.
All about ETFs, what's happening in the Australian market, who's buying in and what they're buying. Great chat.
Yeah, 2 great pieces of content coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Monday, the 7th of October, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.